Darshan Doshi. I'm the director of FCEI. We are trying to build a community of entrepreneurs and an entrepreneurship culture, not just at Flame University, but also Pune. Right? So Pune has some great entrepreneurs. Historically, has been very, very entrepreneurial in its thinking and action, but also we want to kind of support that going forward. Right? So how do we do that? There's an African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, right? So what we are trying to do over here is to create an entrepreneurial village whereby business leaders, entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, investors, all of them come together, right? All of students, faculty, entrepreneurs, right? All of them come together and are kind of feeding off each other, supporting each other to be able to help not just launch ventures, but build scalable global ventures out of Pune, out of India itself. So what is the vision? We want to really identify high potential individuals and teams and support them, encourage them through and incentivize them to do their best. And how do we do that? We have various initiatives at the Flame Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. One is the incubator program, which we call as the Flame Origins program. The applications are open. What we are looking for are startups who have committed founders to their ventures, who are working on it full time. So on a minimum, we are looking at product ready, commercially tested products. And on an ideal stage, we are looking at companies who have about 5 to 10, maybe 15 customers, right? That is what we are looking at. We are sector agnostic, so we are hoping to have a good mixture of non-tech, tech, and social ventures. In fact, our preference is to go towards non-tech ventures because I think there's enough support across the country for tech ventures. Okay. The other initiatives include speaker series. So today we have Dr. Saras Sarasvathy coming from University of Virginia, and she's agreed to conduct a full day workshop on effectuation, also from a faculty development perspective, right, or a community development perspective. Yesterday we had half a day workshop where we witnessed about 35-40 entrepreneurs and about 35-40 students from Flame go through a half day workshop. It was really good. We had some really good interactions and discussions, and I know she prefers it this way. So today also hoping to have some good insightful discussions amongst us. So these are some of the advisors helping us at FCEI. We've got Prasanna Krishnamurthy, who's one of the best tech mentors in the country. Amay Machilkar, who heads GeoGen Next. Sashi Chimala, who's a 6-time entrepreneur and EVP at Wadhwani Foundation. He's built businesses not just in India but in the US as well, tech and non-tech. Kuntal Shah, who comes from an investment background, who really has a knack for identifying founders who have the appetite or the hunger to build some scalable businesses. And Suhas Kandlaskar, who recently retired from Mercedes-Benz India. He was the first employee at Mercedes-Benz India, and to take it to the level that it is today. Right? So these are just some of the advisors. Again, we hope to put together a lot more, a bigger pool of advisors and mentors who will not just help the Flame Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, but also the entrepreneurs and the students that are associated with it. What will it have? It's an equity-free program. We don't charge for the accelerator program. We give access to customers, partners, investors. We have a beautiful campus, as you can see. We will have beautiful co-working space that is available 24/7, 365 for the entrepreneurs. And functional guidance, strategic guidance. We'll have a structured, try to put some structure to the madness of how to launch and grow a business. We'll try to do that as well. But really it requires everybody to come together and looking at all of you to contribute in some way as well. So I think it's really important that we all support each other and build a community going forward as well. What will they get? I don't want to get too much about it, but essentially they will leave, the startups will leave with a well-formed company, a good team, pool of advisors, mentors, some leads, some customers. If they need funding, we'll give them access to funding as well. So if you know any startup who you think could benefit from such a program, please ask them to reach out to me or to apply on our website. If there's anything else that I could do, then do let me know as well. Previously, I used to head programs at GeoGenNext, which is the startup initiative of Reliance Industries. I also have been part of Wadhwani Foundation, where I helped them launch their venture scale-up program, their SME program. So, been in and around the startup ecosystem in India and in Boston for some time. Yeah. So, without further ado, would request the Dean of Flame School of Business, Dr. Dwarika Prasad Unyal, to give a quick overview, share some words, and introduce Saras.
Thank you, Darshan. A very good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
And welcome to Flame for all those people who have come from far and wide at the same time close to home as well. It's a pleasure to host you at Flame, especially on the behalf of the Board of Management of Flame University, on the behalf of my colleagues from all these schools, so some of you who are new to the structure. So we run a very interesting multi-faculty but very, very closely knit interdisciplinary programs at an undergrad and postgrad level. So we have a very, very unique Flame School of Liberal Education, which is India's first and the foremost liberal arts college, as you may know. We run a very thriving business program here at the Flame School of Business, both at the undergrad and the postgrad level. We are one of the very unique places to have a school of performing arts and the fine arts, wherein students get access to dance, music, theatre and fine arts, which is very, very, very interesting, in a particular domain. And of course, we do have a very, very exciting School of Communication, which focuses a lot on film and television and has made huge impact in the space of digital communication, digital marketing. That's about Flame, and that's what we've been doing. I'm very, very excited to work with Darshan. Darshan and I, we have our offices very close by, and we keep talking a lot about his passion towards entrepreneurship, and that's the very reason he has joined us, and we're really happy to have him launch this Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here. And we're very fortunate that we have somebody of the caliber of Dr. Saras Sarasvathy to agree to be advisor and mentor and do the first workshop to launch this center for us. So thank you, Dr. Sarasvathy, for agreeing to come here. And yesterday I was part of the workshop she did because half of my job profile, which Darshan didn't tell, that I'm an entrepreneur myself and run 3 companies. So I was very, very, I really learned a lot from the art of effectuation yesterday, and a great time talking and discussing. Just to give a brief background of Dr. Sarasvathy, she is the Paul H. Hamaker Professor of Business Administration at the Darden School of Business, University of Virginia, USA. Universities around the world recognize her contributions to entrepreneurship research and education by awarding her the following professorships. Apart from her chair professorship at the University of Virginia, she also holds the Jamuna Raghavan Chair at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. And as incidentally, I was telling her in the morning that after this program, I'm actually going to her place, and we keep pulling each other's legs, saying that which is better, the A or the B or the C or L. But now we have 20 of them, so now I think the debate would keep on happening. She also is the university chair, has held the university chair from the Nankai University in Tianjin, China, and the Jubilee Professorship from Chalmers University in Gothenburg in Sweden. In 2007, Dr. Sarasvathy was named as one of the top 18 entrepreneurship professors of the Fortune Small Business magazine. In 2013, Babson College awarded her an honorary doctorate for the impact of her work on entrepreneurship education. So I see there's a Babson connection between Darshan and Saras. Darshan happens to be the alumnus of the Babson College. Most recently, a recognition and active engagement, the students, Dr. Sarasvathy became the 2015 Meet Colley Honored Faculty at University of Virginia. Now, her area of research and consulting and training is very, very interesting. We get people who do something on incubation, something on innovation, something on design thinking. But this is something very, very interesting which has happened across the decade she's worked on. So effectuation is her area, which is widely acclaimed as a rigorous framework for understanding the creation and growth of new organizations and markets. The research program based on effectuation involves over 100 of scholars from around the world, and hence she's been able to create an amazing ecosystem of people around this particular aspect, and all this could be available to all of you through her website called effectuation.org. Dr. Sarasvathy has also developed several cases and other instruction material, but more importantly, she has written a book called Effectual Entrepreneurship, which has won the gold medal in the 2012 Axiom Business Book Awards. She, of course, serves on the board of many organizations, including an interesting organization called Lending Tree, on the advisory board of academic institutions in Europe and Asia. I'm very fortunate to have Saras with us in Flame as well. Where a very interesting anecdotal thing which I found when I was, Darshan and I were researching a lot about her profile, is the fact that she mentions it very, very subtly, but some of us, if we would have had that kind of thing, we would have actually written in a huge Comic Sans, 24 bold, font, in the sense that her thesis on entrepreneurship and expertise was supervised was none other than Herbert Simon at Carnegie Mellon, who happens to be the 1978 Nobel laureate in economics. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause for Dr. Saras Sarasvathy. And on behalf of everybody at Flame University, I welcome her again. And I welcome all of you. Enjoy the place, enjoy the weather, enjoy this particular valley. And I was telling the couple of entrepreneurs yesterday that, valleys have a very interesting connotations with entrepreneurship and the businesses. And I guess we have been able to create a very unique Flame Valley out here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Flame Valley. Thank you.
So you should wait until the end of the day for the applause. I should make sure I earn it. But thank you for being here, and welcome as well. As I always say, educators are very dear to my heart. In fact, I agreed to do yesterday's thing only because Darshan said I can do today, right, to spend some time with educators. So we have the whole day in front of us, and I want to tell you, we're basically dividing it into 4 parts, roughly 90 minutes each. So the first part we'll spend a little time, I'll just go through the basics of effectuation. So not many of you have heard of it, so I will cover the basics very quickly, hopefully. Then in the second part, we'll keep it very interactive, and you can ask questions, make comments anytime you want, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. So in the second session, what I'd like to do is to really walk you through some materials, and especially teaching materials that I actually use, and we'll have some discussions about how to teach, okay. And then during lunch, in small groups, I want you to actually create a module that you can teach, okay. And then I want you to come back and present your class plan, then I can give you some feedback. We can get feedback from each other as well. And then finally, we'll have an open discussion to broaden up, like how can we actually have impact through entrepreneurship and also through education. This is kind of roughly the plan. Is that good? Okay. So since you have you know about it and have actually taught, why don't you get us started by giving an introduction, so it also gives my throat a chance to catch up.
Yeah, I will never be able to match what she's going to say, but
This is not a competition,
no, but in terms of delivery, in terms of concept clarity, so effectuation basically, the way I've understood is what an expert entrepreneur does, in their journey. entrepreneurship. So expert entrepreneur can be a serial entrepreneur or can be somebody who has have an experience for a long period. So usually we have the idea that you plan first and then you start a business. Here it talks about that whatever you have, the world in hand. So whatever resources you have, you start with that. You try and collaborate with partners and you try and understand. Instead of selling your product, you try and collaborate with the partners and you modify. So you modify your product, your idea according to what the collaborators have to offer, their strengths. So you kind of have a crazy quill. Then there's a principle of lemonade. So you basically, so there are many challenges in the entire journey. So instead of getting bogged down with the challenges, usually expert entrepreneurs, they convert those challenges into the opportunities. So I don't know if that's lemonade or.
We'll cover every one of them. You're doing a great job.
Yeah. So that is another one. Then there is a principle called pilot in the plane. So unless you actually.
And nobody understands pilot on the plane.
So the way I understand is, unless and until you get your hands dirty, unless and until you take charge, take ownership, it's not possible to, be or command or have the correct direction, basically. So entrepreneurs, they basically take ownership and they give direction to their thoughts, their vision, and that's the way they move forward. It's too spontaneous.
No, this is lovely. No. I always learn from the way somebody else explained, for the simple reason that as a teacher, my mom growing up, I was very fortunate in the sense that, I just call it winning the genetic lottery in some ways, right? Things came easily to me. I could ace exams, math or whatever. But luckily, I also had a wise mother. Have a wise mother. She's still around. Thank God. She's 88. She lives with me. But she used to tell that, the teacher gave you 100 out of 100 in mathematics doesn't mean you know math, right? If you can teach somebody who is struggling, then you have actually learnt it. And that is the toughest test. One of the things we should do to our students, especially the good ones, right? Because it's when you are good at it, there's some ways, there's a hard wiring in your brain, right? It comes a little easy. But when you try to teach somebody who's struggling, that's when you know whether you have actually understood it or it's just your brain repeating things, because you happen to have very good neuronal connections or something like that. And so it's always interesting to me when people actually repeat it. So you're one of the first people who have actually learnt and taught effectuation and sort of had this idea of ownership that you talked about, right? And usually people don't explain and they don't bring that word into it. And so that's very interesting to me. So thank you for that. And I want to give you a hand. And you did a great job. Basically, she's covered the ground. We're just going to understand it in some depth, some of these things. And thank you from the other perspective, because I think my throat actually woke up from the things. So hopefully, I'll be able to talk a little bit. I'm going to tell you a little bit about where this the ideas came from. I'm not some genius, in my bathtub and then I get this thing. There's actually research behind it. I'm going to give you a little bit of the background of the research, and then we will go into the findings, and then I'm going to focus on how do you teach this a lot. So that's what we're going to do in the next 70 or 80 minutes or whatever. So because of this, I actually get to travel around the world, right? I do this, and my focus these days is actually working with educators around the world. Before that, when I first came out of the PhD program, anybody would call me, I'm grateful, I'd just go and give a talk, right? So I talk to entrepreneurs and around the world, and then nowadays, even if I come to do the educator, then people twist my arm to also talk to entrepreneurs, which I love too, but I'm just thinking educators have much larger impact, and you can do only so much in life. So people will say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but they'll say, I don't have an idea, right? Can you tell me what else you hear? I want to be an entrepreneur, but, so one is I don't have an idea. What else? I need money, right? I don't have money. And what they usually mean by that is, I don't have money. Sometimes I don't have time. I have 3 kids, I don't have all kinds of resources. But I don't have money. What else? I don't have a team. So resource, all kinds of resources. What else?
I don't have expertise. I don't know how to go.
Yeah. So this is what happens when you have a slide deck. Things don't go in order. One more thing. I don't know what to do. It's definitely one thing. What else? There's at least one more. I don't have experience, so I don't know what to do. What else? So the next one, the most important thing is they'll say, I'm afraid to fail. Right? I want to be an entrepreneur, but I'm afraid to fail. And that will take many forms as well. I'm not a risk taker, so I'm not in a position to take a risk, this kind of. So the 4 reasons, everywhere you get this. I don't have an idea. I don't have money, resources, team, some kind of resources I don't have. I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid to fail. These are the 4. So you will see through the day, and we'll come back to that at the end of the day, throughout the day, that a lot of these things that the expert entrepreneurs have learned will answer these questions. So I tell my students, my aim is not to make everybody into an entrepreneur, right? That is pointless. My aim is to say, if you say you want to be an entrepreneur, you have dreams of doing things or being your own boss or changing the world or becoming a billionaire or whatever, you want to be an entrepreneur, but if these are the reasons, this one I can help you with, right? So as an educator, I always make clear the aim is not to make you into an entrepreneur. The aim is to, if you want to be an entrepreneur, so it's like, I cannot give you a voice if I'm a music teacher. But if you want to learn music, no matter what kind of voice you come up with, I can teach you to sing better, right? And that's kind of the aim of entrepreneurship. So here we go. So once people trust you on that, you start telling them, and they have this conventional wisdom, this idea of how entrepreneurship is supposed to happen, and they usually get that from the media, right? You know this one also, right? You have to start, you have to come up with an idea, like a brilliant idea. Then what do? What is the conventional wisdom? How you are supposed to build a venture?
Find some money.
Find some money. So in order to find some money, you show there is a large market, right? You'll do all kinds of market validation and say there's a large market. You write a business plan and then you raise money, right? You jump to money very quickly, but you're absolutely right. A lot of the people think that the second step is money. Then I ask them, oh, what do you need to do to raise money? Then they'll say all these other things. And then as part of raising the money, sometimes you also have to put together a team, things like that. And then you build and grow the venture once you have the money. Then you go public or sell. And then I always make fun, say, now what do you do? If you have done all of these things, and especially as educators, what do you think they should do? Once they've done all these things.
Capture the learning.
Pardon?
Capture the learning.
Capture the learning.
Which is what, as an educator, you would want them to do. But
No, if they have already, they've taken your course and then they have done all these things.
Have another idea?
See, educators are boring. See, this is what you should be doing. That's the dream that we should be selling. And I'm like, no. I say, yeah, sure, go out to the Bahamas. But if that's all you do, I'm coming after you. Right? I'll keep track of your, address and phone number. I'll come back and catch you, because the world needs way more than you're taking off to the Bahamas. But this is conventional wisdom. This is what the media portrays of, making lots and lots of money. But the idea is there is this process. And unfortunately, especially when I first came into academia, this was the dominant model being taught in entrepreneurship courses, right? This was not just the media hype. This was how people structure their courses. They'll have this module on ideation, there's a whole bunch of stuff on market research and market validation, and then they'll teach you, usually the first course ends there, right? Learn to write a business plan and pitch. Then maybe you have a course on entrepreneurial finance or something, or maybe you have a Entrepreneurship 2 module where you actually learn how to build a company, right? That's how it was. But we know that conventional wisdom is usually wrong. So, when I came into academia, I said I want to understand something else. I want to understand what should I be teaching. And a lot of that old model came from mostly this thing, entrepreneurship as a field did not arise the way some of the other fields have arisen. Did not arise from research, it did not arise from intellectual work. A lot of it just arose from student demand. A student want to understand entrepreneurship, and colleges were saying like, how do we offer this course, and then they would just bring in darshan. So, I can pick on darshan. What does darshan know? Nothing, right? They'll bring in somebody with a little entrepreneurial experience, or they'll bring in an investor. And they ask them to teach a course, and darshan, being a very nice guy wanting to give back to society, he'll come in, and what can darshan teach? He just teaches from his experience, right? And then he reads something somebody else has written, and they have this module, and it seems like, okay, that's a nice framework, like I can use that. And that's what a lot of things happen, and especially they were driven by a lot of entrepreneurship programs. The teaching programs in the US were literally funded by VCs as well. And this model actually the VCs came up with, step by step. Usually in actual fact, VCs come in only around this side, right? This is where they come in, and they require business plans. They know virtually nothing about these two. So, that one they were just like making up on how that happened. So, this model came from that, and then the media really loves it even today. So, when I came into academia, I said, I need to understand what should I be teaching, and how will I know that that's what I should be teaching. Now, I had also been an entrepreneur, and it's very easy to think from your experience you can teach people, but because I got an opportunity to be in academia, I also started noticing how other people had built businesses, and I realized most people, the way they build business is much more messy than this. So, I was at Carnegie Mellon, I got to work with Herbert Simon, and I said there has to be a scientific way of understanding what is it that expert entrepreneurs learn through their experience that I can also learn. So, not everything in experience is actually learnable or teachable, right? Some of it is just intuitive and tacit, but there is a lot of stuff that we can actually learn. Plus, I also wanted to learn what could be learned and taught inside a classroom, right? This is what I was going to be doing. So, that was the focus of my research. So, what do I mean by expert entrepreneur here? Expert entrepreneur is not only somebody who has succeeded. It is somebody who has been through every possible experience that entrepreneurship can offer, all the way from failure to spectacular success. And so, these are people who have 15 years or longer of starting and running companies, multiple ventures including successes and failures, and at least one company public. And the public thing was actually a restriction that they put on my dissertation, because you have to have verifiable data. So, if you just go to privately owned firms, you don't, the data is difficult to show, and this was just the first study. Okay. Since then, hundreds of studies have been done. In fact, we had the 5th International Effectuation Conference in June in Darden, and one of my colleagues, Stuart, did a literature review, and he found 755 academic papers published, almost all of which we actually have available on effectuation.org along with teaching materials and everything. So, this has become something that serious academics have gotten interested in doing research, but then they also teach in the classroom, and then they have developed both research and teaching materials based on classroom experience. So, there is also a whole bunch of research purely connected with teaching that is happening. So, it is very exciting what is going on there, but this was just the first study. And the idea of the first study was, let us actually show that there is something called entrepreneurial expertise and that has elements in it that are teachable and learnable, and these elements go beyond the toolbox, right? We still have to teach the toolbox. Our students still have to learn like how to actually calculate cash flows, right? How to do a profit and loss and balance sheet, the basic accounting, basic marketing, basic strategy, all the basic finance, hiring, everything they have to still know. So, the issue is not that you do not have to teach any of those things. So, but beyond the toolbox, how to write a business plan, how to make a pitch, all of that, what is there that the entrepreneurs learn the hard way, not just the skill set, but the actual learnings. And because I was at CMU, they had invented a method to study expertise, and they had studied experts in 200 different domains, but they had not studied entrepreneurs. So I as a PhD student, it's very exciting to find that, right? And so I said, okay, I'm just going to take that method, I'm going to apply it to entrepreneurship. So I had to define, first of all, who is an expert entrepreneur, and then I could apply the method. So this was the definition. The definition is also connected with the definition of any kind of expert in cognitive science. So the method comes from cognitive science, the science of thinking and deciding. Is what it's part of psychology, but it's also part of neuroscience and artificial intelligence. So the method that I use is called think aloud verbal protocols. So now think for a few minutes, think like a researcher, even though your research may not be your number one thing. So if you could go, so by the way, by this definition there were 245 people in the world who qualified. I wrote to all 245 and 45 agreed to participate in the study. Now if you could actually go and talk to these 45 people, what kinds of questions would you want to ask them? I told you this is going to be interactive, and I know educators like to talk. Come on. What is the source? What is the source of your, how do you get ideas? Okay, what else?
What's the problem you're facing and how you want to,
Okay. So how do you get your ideas and how they are related to problems? So this one is current, that one is how did it happen in the past. What else?
Do you believe you have a repeatable process to the entire journey?
Okay. So do you believe that you actually know how to build a company, right? In a way, just because you succeeded or did doesn't necessarily mean, you may just be winging it. Out of sheer luck, a lot of people can become very successful. What else?
You have to identify market for your idea.
Yeah. So how do you identify markets? Anything else? Just a couple more. Yeah.
What are the recurring areas of failure or success?
So you definitely want to know where, tell me a little bit about failures and what are some sources of failures, and maybe also how you deal with them. Okay, very good questions, right? So a lot of these things are things we want to be teaching our students as well. So normally you can go and interview people and ask these questions, and especially if you do like 45 interviews, you can get very good data and you can learn. There is only one problem with it, and that is when the way people think about what they have learned or what they think they have learned is not always what they have actually learned. So again, I am sure this question comes up with your students, can entrepreneurship be taught? And my students will always, so I usually try, now it's a little difficult, but when I first came out of the PhD program, nowhere in my resume it said I had any entrepreneurial experience. So students are very skeptical if you have never started a company. Right, so I used to ask my students, so if you want to play golf, who do you want to teach you? And they will say Tiger Woods, right? And I tell them wrong answer. Think about a minute. There are way better teachers, but there is definitely at least one way better teacher than Tiger Woods. Yes? Exactly. Tiger Woods' father should be the person, because he knows how to create a Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods does not know how to create a Tiger Woods, right? He knows how to make the swing, but he doesn't know what actually works, and then how does that translate to somebody of a different height and weight or a different kind of shoulder strength, all of those kinds of things. So teachers and coaches are what I said, they may not actually play, but they sit and watch, hundreds of people, they watch videos, and he watched his son and he tried different things, hold the iron this way, and there's a whole bunch of things, how you balance your weight on the foot. There's 1,000 things that teachers actually look at. And so the idea was really that being able to play golf, sure, might be useful, but you don't have to be a golf pro to be a good teacher. And so that was the idea here, to say just asking the entrepreneurs what lessons they think they learned is one kind of knowledge, but we wanted to know what is it that they actually learned, right? And so the Think Aloud protocol allows you to do that. What it does is, so they started in the 50s and 60s by studying chess grandmasters. So they would actually go to these chess grandmasters, and what they will do is they will actually make them play a chess game, except they will tell them you have to talk continuously while you come up with the next move, right. You cannot just sit, you know, very wise for half an hour and then make the move. And the idea was to think all the thoughts that are going on inside their head. So you look at what kinds of things they are thinking, how they are managing distraction. What's the first thing they look at? What's the second thing? What kind of information do they ignore? You know, all those kinds of things. And they came up with a very different model of how what chess grandmasters do well. So if I ask you, what's the difference between like a chess grandmaster and a novice? What is it that people who are very good at playing chess, what do you think they do better?
Intuition.
Pardon?
Intuition.
What does that mean?
Like they know intuitively how to respond, how to react, what's the next step there.
Yeah, what does that mean? So how do you get intuition?
I have normally practices, experiences,
Hmm.
learn from.
Okay. But if you are doing this study, having them think, what do you think is the difference between a pro and a novice? Just think, any other ideas on what it is that chess grandmasters do better than novices?
Chess, I think it boils down a lot to memorizing different moves that have been played across over hundreds of years probably, where they know.
Now you are basically saying what is intuition, right? So intuition is you have seen this thing happen over and over and over again, that you do not have to think step by step. So you can look at this, and at that time the running hypothesis was chess grandmasters are able to think several moves ahead of their opponent, right? They can think, if I make this move, then that move, then what is the, and then they proved actually that that is not correct. That chess grandmasters can also think only 2 or 3 moves ahead, just like the novice, because the brain is limited in thinking ahead of time. But they showed that chess grandmasters had a much bigger database in the back of their head. So they do not even have to think. The moment you make the move, it already reminds them of what were the steps that led to the end game. So they are very good at pattern recognition. That is what intuition is. So when you first drive a car, right, it is so difficult because you are trying to do 7 different things. But once you start driving a car, now you probably do not even know how you got from your garage to the office, because it is completely automatized. Now the brain, it's gone into the neuronal level, so you don't have to think anymore, and that's what intuition is, right? So what we call intuition is this pattern recognition that has become so automatic that instantaneously you kind of know where it fits in. But the interesting thing here is that's true when an expert plays a novice, right? What happens when an expert plays another expert? And that's where unpredictability comes back in, right? And that's why games become interesting. And so this is not a model of sure success, but it is a model of learning. That is, if an expert plays a novice, every single time they will win. Expert plays an expert, all bets are off. So it's not about success, it's truly about learning. And so I could use this method to study the expert entrepreneurs. So what I did was I created a 17-page problem set of 10 typical decisions. So all these questions that you ask, where did the idea come from, like how do you find a market for it, or how do you deal with failure, all of those things. I created like this scenario where, so the first thing I did was I said, and by the way, it took a long time to even come up with what is this thing around which you have to do it. So you have 17 pages of all kind of real life messy data from which you have to make the decisions, right? That's the idea. So I told them you have come up with this game of entrepreneurship, and you think that, you know, educators will be interested in it, and then gaming people will be interested in it. And so basically just I tried to say this is an idea. Now I said, okay, how do you, what do you think is the market? Who do you think are your customers? Who do you think are your competitors? How large do you think the market is? How will you find out information about the market? Stuff like that. So that would be the first question. Then in the second one, I gave them a lot of market research that I went out and I literally did a lot of market research and wrote business plans for this idea, by the way, this imaginary idea. And I gave them a lot of market research data, and I told them, now tell me which segment will you sell it to. how will you price the product, and what is the channel you will use to get the sales done. So, marketing question. Then I told them, okay, you started this thing and you are doing this and you have to raise some money, right, and here are some different options and a whole bunch of data on that. Then you could go with friends and family, angel investors, VCs, and then I would ask them so finance question, then hiring question, then questions where things go wrong, you get negative market feedback, crisis happens, so a whole bunch of different, so that gets at the failure. So literally putting them into this role of doing what they know how to do. And if you have several people and they have built companies in every industry you can imagine, right, so made sure that there is variation across industry. Why? Because we are trying to capture entrepreneurial expertise. So, we do not want to have all software companies, then we do not know how to teach somebody to build a retail product, right. So, made sure there was variation there, but then they are all working their way through this exact same problem set. So, you also get data that you can compare across all these people. So, to get a feel for the method, right, think about if I asked you to say come up with a teaching plan for your very first class session on entrepreneurship, and I want you, as you are coming up with it, I want you to talk continuously, right. I will be able to know what is the first thing that you think about, right. Some of us will think about, oh, it has to be experiential, so I have to find an experiential exercise, or somebody else will say, I like the problem based approach, so let us give them a problem, or somebody else will say, oh, I am going to look for a case study. So, I will know a lot about not whether you know to teach, but I know how you think about teaching, right. It is that kind of a, so I could get that kind of data. So, effectuation comes from that research, and I am going to tell you, now I am going to go into the findings and the principles and how to teach and stuff. But any questions so far on where this information is coming from? Any questions about the research? Yes?
Were you surprised by the outcomes, or could you just revalidate it?
That's a good question. So, as I said, I had been an entrepreneur and I have interacted with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in preparation for this thing. And so, I got to go out to meet each of these people, and I had asked them 2 hours, because it takes 2 hours to work your way through this problem set. So, I would go in there, and remember, these are like billionaires at this point in time, and they are expecting some young PhD student. I was not young then, now I am 200. The young PhD student come and they think it is going to be an interview, and they have done thousands of interviews. So, they are in an expansive mood, whatever they are thinking. Then I go and put this thing 17 pages in front of them, take out my tape recorder, and I said, thank you so much for your time, please start reading, right, because the method requires that I do not interact with them, right. So, initially they do not know what to do, but they have already cleared their calendar and given me 2 hours, so they start reading. So, the first page gives them instructions on what to do, and my only task during the experiment is, if they stop for more than 4 seconds, I have to tell them, please keep talking. Right, you have to talk continuously, because if they stop, then you lose data, because then we do not know what is going on in their mind, right. So, they will go through that, and usually by the second or third page they get into it, right, then they are actually doing it, and they will go through this whole thing, and I am listening. As a PhD student, you want to find magic, right, you want to like find that aha moment, and then the first one, the second one, the third one, they just sound like entrepreneurs talking, and I have heard a lot of them. So, I am slowly getting panicked and I have to come back and face Herbert Simon every time. And Herb has this thing, he will come in, he will usually be reading something, and then I walk in and he will say, very good to see you, had a good trip, and then say, have a seat, and then he will sit down and say, so Saras, what do we know now that we did not know the last time we met? I am like, nothing. You start getting desperate. So, by the time I got to the third one, I found something, right. What did I find? All these entrepreneurs would say something nasty about market research, right. They would say, I hate market research, or they will say, market research never works and I would not do. Traditionally, they tell you are supposed to do this, but every time I have done it, it has never worked out, so I will never do it, that kind of thing. Or some people will even get poetic and say really nasty things. So, I told Simon, I have found something. expert entrepreneurs hate market research. Then he looks at me and says, that's very interesting, but you do know that that is not a dissertation. So, what do you mean by market research? Like, or what do they mean by market research? What do they mean by hate? What do you mean hate? How can you show like they hate, right? What is there in the data that shows, and why do they hate it? And if they hate it, how do they make marketing decisions? So I had a wonderful advisor, again good fortune. So I'd go back with, now I got an idea, now I go back and look at the data, like actually, and then I start realizing that it's not market research that they are hating. So here's the surprise, even though I've been an entrepreneur and worked with this is what I mean by Tiger Woods doesn't know. Those entrepreneurs did not know, and I'll give you examples later on the kinds of things they said. They thought that, like this expert chess players, they thought they could see things that other people could not see, right? That they have this intuition, they have in actual fact, let me tell you, they could not. So in fact, one of the guys, I'll give you an actual example. One of the guys in the study says, when other people see blank canvas, I can see the painting. Right? I actually says that in the. And then you look and analyze that, the guy can't see the painting. Let me tell you, he can't see the canvas either. But he's very, very good at stitching together something. So I can even walk you through, in the book, I have that entire protocol you can think. So the surprise was that they actually are saying they will not use any kind of predictive information about the future. It's not that market research by itself is bad. Suppose I have all the data in the world on how people actually buy this product, or how they have bought in the past, or why they, so all of that, they'll say prediction about the past is fine, right? But if then you say therefore this person will behave this way, or even if that person says themselves, I will buy this or I will not buy it, I will pay $5 for it, I will not, all that information they will ignore. Right? Any information that is making a prediction about the future, they will ignore. So here's the finding, and I'm going to come to your question. The finding is, in traditional, I'm sorry you can't see it very well, it says to the extent you can predict the future, you can control it. So in traditional business schools, in all the functional areas, even now what we teach people is how to predict better, right? When you make decisions under uncertainty, learning to predict better is a good skill, and as faculty we usually have done a lot of research on prediction techniques, right? This is what they teach. The expert entrepreneurs are saying if the future is difficult to predict, don't predict it, right? So every strategy, every technique, all the principles of effectuation are about not predicting the future, in the sense that you have to still make decisions about an unpredictable future, but you are doing it without predicting, and I am going to go into that those details. So that was a surprise, the idea, and they did not know it, I did not know it, but once I got this intuition, then I knew where to go to develop it. Now I know how to code my data. I go back and look for every mention, wherever there is predictive information in the problem set, and what did they do? Did they ignore it? Did they say something against it? And then I knew I had something, and that's when the whole kind of, now the real scholarship begins, right? There's the empirical work, and then the actually developing that into a model or a framework or a theory, that began. Okay, great question. I saw your hand.
I think you answered my earlier question, but now I have another question.
Sure.
I fully agree that, because entrepreneurs really don't like predictive, and they like to take decisions based on, could be hunches or whatever, they could. But then if you need to convince someone,
yes,
because you need to take them on your board,
correct,
and then that may not work.
Correct, so absolutely, because the world is very causal.
Exactly.
Yeah, people demand business plans, people expect you to do projections of future cash flows or the market size and growth and stuff like that. Excellent question, and I'll give you again an example from an actual entrepreneur story. So, so they will say, talk causally, but build the venture effectually. Wow. Right? So build the venture effectually, but communicate causally, that kind of thing. I'll give you an actual example also. Mike O'Donnell, who built 22 different technology ventures, the very successful serial entrepreneur, he talks about this, and there's actually a video on YouTube So what he did was, I think it was his first couple of ventures, he kind of bootstrapped and did that. And then he came up with this venture idea which was really scalable, it could be a huge market, and he knew it was a scalable venture because he had built it effectually to the extent that he knew this one, if with a little bit of money, could be a huge venture. So he found somebody who introduced him, like one of the junior partners in Kleiner Perkins, which is a big VC firm in Silicon Valley, in fact like a top VC firm. So he found somebody who was willing to put him in front of Kleiner Perkins partners so he could make his pitch. So he's very excited. So he's prepared this pitch and everything, and they have given him the after lunch slot, like at 1 o'clock or 1:30 when he's going to present. So, but to be safe, he comes at 11 o'clock and he meets his champion inside, the junior partner who arranged the meeting, and he says, here's my slide deck, can you take a look at it before I make the presentation? So that guy goes over the slide deck and it says, you know, the market is like $250 million or something like that. And he says, oh my God, Mike, you know, you cannot say this to the partners because Kleiner Perkins will not even look at anything that is lower than $2 billion market. So Mike, and this is on YouTube, like so he goes down to his car in a hurry, he says, brings his like Excel model, just changes it to $2.5 billion, does all the numbers and goes and presents it. So he's done this, so I bring him to Darden and my school, Darden. And Darden is very big on business and society together, right? So all of us teach business ethics and I teach business ethics. So my students are very ethics conscious. So naturally a student asks, but that sounds like really unethical to me, right? You cannot just like change the number or just multiply everything by 10 and then you're done. So Mike says, yeah, you're correct. That would be unethical if I actually believed the original market was 250 million. I don't know that either. I made my best guess, and if that is going to prevent me, I don't know whether it will be 2.5 billion. I don't know whether it will be 2. I literally don't know what the market will be, right? And if I say that, I don't get anything. So if they want to believe and if they think anybody can be able to predict the market, then that's their problem. But here is how I am actually ethical. And he says, because I am going to get up every morning and work my right, and I'll face humiliation, I'll face whatever it takes to make those some money. So I said, that's where my ethics is. But if they believe and they want to believe that either they or I can predict the future, you know, like their number is as good as mine. And so that's the thing, and I have lots of little stories of this kind of communication issues and stuff like that. Your question.
I'm interested.
See, my voice is now like enjoying this.
I'm interested in learning more about this because I think think out loud or talk while you're thinking is not an easy thing.
No, it's not.
And how did you get them to be able to do that so that you can collect? Because those are the wisdom or the data that's the gold mine.
Correct. Good point. And especially as a PhD student, and you're going to meet all these people and you're going to make them talk and you're the only other person in the room, yeah, you get nervous. So I practice with local entrepreneurs before going there. But the interesting thing is you only have a first few minutes of embarrassment. So if I asked you to actually do it, you can try this, try this with other people. People actually get into it. And then once they get into it, it becomes normal.
So they read the questions and they just talk as they are reading the questions.
Correct. So the usual example I like to give you is, suppose I ask you to multiply 24 by 32. And I say, you have to talk continuously as you multiply and no paper and pen, right? So most people like close their eyes and they will say 24 times 32, 4 times 2, 2 times 2. They're literally they're doing this in their mental paper and pen, right? So they'll struggle a little bit and many people will actually come up with the wrong answer. But I don't care about the wrong answer. I just want to know what did they do. They tried to multiply 4 times 2 and 2 times 2 and write that down. That's the information I want.
So do you give them specific time, like how much you want them to talk about
Yeah.
questions?
No. They can take, they just, do, yeah, that's why I asked for a lot of time. So, and the interesting thing is, you give them usually a starter problem like that. Where, and then as they start doing it, so the first page gives you instructions, and then along with that you also give them a little practice exercise, which you will not analyze as data. And then once they get into that thing, then they turn the page and then they're getting into the actual problem. And because they have used this method, as I said, in 200 domains, so we know that human beings can do it. It is just a little embarrassing the first few minutes, but once you get, and this is something they do all the time, right? So people will bring in a newspaper article or some like this quarterly financials. They know how to do. They bring them, and usually they actually, if you think about it, in real life, they'll be looking at it and they're looking at, okay, let's look at the top line. Looks like we're doing very well with top line, but it looks like bottom line has gone down a little bit. And what is happening here is maybe the variable marketing margin this time something has happened. Have we spent more on marketing? You know, they do this regularly with their own staff, right? So it's not like, I put in a lot of effort in the way I designed the problem set.
Yeah, and setting up
I worked
the-
with 50 different entrepreneurs in Pittsburgh to come up with this particular thing. And I also tested it on entrepreneurs, so I know that people can do this naturally. So all of that goes into the instrument design. But good question. Yes?
I just wanted to ask about the same, verbalizing how easy or difficult it is. I think you've answered most of that.
Yeah.
But are there any limitations to the think aloud verbal protocol?
Yeah, sure, because you can only use like a hypothetical.
Right.
So you're not observing them making real decisions. Every method always has pros and cons. So this is the advantage of the method is you can look into their heads in some ways, plus you can compare across heads, right? That is the beauty of the method, but the difficulty is it's not real. That is why since then, as I told you, now hundreds of studies have come. So first of all, people replicated that study, the think aloud study, using other, so they replicated with novices, they replicated with expert corporate managers who don't have entrepreneurial experience. Then we created a survey based on that, and based on the survey we studied lots and lots of entrepreneurs. We also looked at angel investors and we looked at VCs to see how causal or effectual they are. And then we have also written, I mean people, when I say we, I mean lots of people. We have written over 200 cases, in great depth. So we also have qualitative data. We have looked at small business owners, we have looked at international business, I mean we really covered the ground on that. So the idea is now we have multiple methods that have looked at the data, so it's validated. But you're absolutely right, the first time the protocol method has that problem, because you can, if you want comparability, you have to give them hypothetical scenario. So if you go to the real world, then there is too much noise, because a retail company will be different than an IT company will be different than a services company. That's the idea. Yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering, once you start getting the answers from entrepreneurs, so you start having your own biases for
Sure.
the results that you get. How do you separate your own personal bias from what information?
Okay. So this is where methods take care of a lot of those things. So I think this is going on, right? That, you know, first I thought market research, then I thought, okay, it's all non-predictive, that they are. So what I do is, the first thing I do is I go in and code the data. First of all, I have to show not just my opinion, I have to code the entire data by just looking at instances of future information, right? So I have to come up with a complete coding of the thing. And not only that, then I give only the coding scheme to two completely outsiders, independent coders, and they recode the data. And it's not only that they're coding only the parts where this is, they have to code the entire data, right? And they do, and then we do statistics on inter-rater reliability, how reliable is that. And then you have, you know, as a PhD student, you also have 3 advisors who poke a thing, and let me tell you, researchers are very, very good at finding fault with other people's research, right? So that's how you ensure. Even then, are there biases? Sure. So one of the things is the biases actually work in your favor, right? If I didn't have entrepreneurial experience, I think it would be much more difficult just from the data to have come up with this insight. But you're right, but by having come up with the insight, you have to show not only that this is going on in the data, you also have to show X, Y and Z is not going on. This is what is real, this is the only thing that is going on. So, you have to also kind of disprove alternative explanations. For example, people would ask me, this could just be that these are really, really successful people, maybe they are just arrogant bastards and they just do not care about information, right. So, hubris was the alternative hypothesis, and I had to actually show that hubris is not what is going on. Then I also, after finishing these experiments, I also went back and did unstructured interviews with them, like semi-structured and unstructured interviews. For example, I went and asked them, are you telling me you are billionaires today, you are saying you are not going to just hire like Gartner or some top market research company to do the market research before you make the investment? And they will say, yes, exactly, we will never do that, right. And with every one of those principles, and they gave me reasons why they would not do that, but more importantly, they gave me examples of when they did that and it did not work. So, I have that data also.
Yeah, I have one more question.
Yeah.
So when you were just listening to them,
Yeah.
so did you have a lot of questions while they were actually talking to themselves?
Oh, yeah.
So how did you kind of stop yourself?
That's just, as a researcher, you have to do it.
Doubts, and if you had your own questions, then you actually
Yeah, then you have a follow-on interview, but don't interrupt the experiment. Yeah. So that's the whole thing. But sometimes here's another thing that happened. One of the entrepreneurs, for example, along the way would say, this is just too boring, I'm not going to do this this is going to be a conversation. And so we had a conversation and I couldn't use that data. It was just data I had to throw out. That also happened. And a second person literally said, I want to read all the questions, I will not read page by page. This whole thing you had to do page by page, because depending on what you did, then the next thing comes, right. If you have read the whole thing and you know what is going to come, that influence. So, that data also I could not use. So, every once in a while those kinds of things with human beings, these things will happen. Yes.
We'll take a break in 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes? Okay.
We'll take a 15-minute break.
Sure.
Is there a video recording of these experiments?
This is not video, I have audio.
Only an audio.
Yeah. And I also have the original instrument if you want to try it. So, there is a book that's been published. Yeah. I only had audio, no video on this. Yeah. And because I also had confidentiality agreements, now of course they all want to claim I was a part of the study, and I'm like, no, you're not getting any credit. Because originally they made me do, write the NDAs and confidentiality agreements and stuff like that. And good research, you usually don't want to reveal the subjects' names, but to some extent I can, because they have gone around telling people I participated in that study, right? Yeah.
Sometimes the research feels a bit intimidating, especially when it's about these interviews,
Yeah.
and you don't know what you're going to get out of it and what you're looking for.
Yeah,
I mean,
all
on
research
one hand,
should be like that. Yeah.
On one hand, you're supposed to have a hypothesis, but in these studies, when there is none and there is
Correct, inductive, yeah.
So, I mean, you said that in the third interview you got the idea that there
Yeah,
was
yeah,
something different in that week.
Yeah.
But sometimes those interviews.
Sometimes I could have done the entire study and found nothing, absolutely, or found trivial things, that we already knew.
Did you, say anything about how you get over that?
Oh, so this one I'm going to give you a very useless answer, and the useless answer is, I had Herbert Simon as my advisor, right? This is as close to God as you can get, and if he said the design is good enough and go for it, like I go for it, right? That's part of it, but it was not, I knew that no matter what, I would find something at least interesting, right? Even if we said, we know here is how entrepreneurs get their idea, or here is how they deal with failure, and let's say I found that, it is still valuable because nobody had actually looked at this particular set of entrepreneurs. So, I knew that no matter what I found or did not find, the fact that I had access to this group of people itself would be a kind of a competitive advantage in research, right. So, I have been, I've been an entrepreneur before, and I have enough street smarts to know that, right. So, I knew there was not any big risk in that sense, that it's not like I'll never get a PhD or it will be a complete, that wasn't an issue at all. And I try to make sure my students, my doctoral students, I always tell my doctoral students, assume you did the study, tell me what you could have found and would it make any difference, and that's the whole idea. So, even before findings, there are ways you can check your research design to make sure that there will be some value in the study. Otherwise, wasting people's time especially very bright, FPM students, PhD students, spending 4 or 5 years of their life doing this one project. Yeah, I feel very responsible to make sure that either way, whatever results come, it will be interesting somehow.
Should we take a break?
I was saying, we have a couple more minutes, right? So what I want to do is, we spent a lot of time thinking about the research, and that's perfectly fine, because for you the findings by themselves are not the issue, because we're going to spend the rest of the day learning how to teach them. So that's not going to be a big issue, but I think I should just simply cover the findings very quickly, at least at one slide with the 5 principles, so that it is coherent, and then we'll take a break and come back and look deeper into it. So I'm just going to walk you very quickly through the thing. So here you can see that the normal way to think about it is, to the extent you can predict, you can control, right? That is like a arrow by arrow extensive kind of argument. Here they actually split it apart. They separated prediction from control. So you got 4 strategies, right? High and low in prediction and control. And we'll go into this. As I said, we'll have plenty of time to get into all of this. So this is high in prediction and high in control is actually visionary strategy. Or you can have low in prediction and low in control, which is adaptive, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen, you also don't have too much control over the situation, so you have to become nimble and agile and adaptive and so on. And this is the standard model, I call it the BAA problem, where you try to gather all the possible information and you do a spreadsheet and you analyze, and then you trying to come up with an optimal strategy, and that really is useless. And then you have the effectual, where you are increasing control. So the idea is high in control but low in prediction, which raises this question, how do you control a future? And the answer is that you work, so control is strategy. So what you mean is, you are always thinking, what is within my control, what is not within my control, and you actually always work with things within your control, and you would look at the future as not something to be predicted and to be placed, you are not placing a bet on a trend, right, that you think will happen. Instead, think about it like sculpting, that you are given the things within your control, that is your clay, you are going to mold the future, you are going to shape it, co-create it, and you co-create it with self-selected stakeholders. So we are going to look at each of these in some depth, and this translated to 5 principles that came from the original data, which has since been validated, which what is your name? Paragi. So Paragi already covered it, I will just cover it one by one. So the first is the bird in hand principle, right. This is, you do not have to have a clear and precise goal to start an effectuation. Instead, you actually say, what are the readily available means I have at hand? And there were 3 categories of means that the expert entrepreneurs used. It was very interesting, they could literally see it in the data. And actually it was not about what I have, it was really about who am I, things like my tastes, my values, my aspirations, my preferences, my passions, my sorrows, like whatever, who am I, what do I know, which is like knowledge and education and skills and all that, and whom do I know. So my networks, my contacts, that kind of thing. So you start, so those were the 3. So that is your bird in hand, and then you say, using the bird in hand, what can I do? And then in choosing amongst the things you could do, you are not calculating expected return. Instead you are saying, what can I do for affordable loss? So, and it is again everything, each individual can decide this on their own. What is my affordable loss? And it will be different for different people. If you are Bill Gates' son, your affordable loss will probably be very high, right. If you and me, it will probably be pretty close to 0, maybe just time and effort. Even that we can say, I am willing to give it, so I am going to give it 6 months, I am not going to leave my job, so I am going to have to work nights and weekends, and I am okay with that. Or and plus, there may be a little bit of money that I have saved, or maybe I have some other resources that I can actually bring to the table, because I actually developed a product. Like if you are a cook, you can actually say, I know, so I can make the product very easily, and then there is a local event which I can go and try to sell. Right? So you can think about affordable loss and each individual, but what you are trying to do is you are trying to keep the downside within your control. Right? You are saying here is how much loss I am willing to take, and then that also influences what kind of project you will do, because you will ask yourself, would I want to do this even if I lost what I put in? So you can see the mentality towards which project you choose changes. Okay? So that is affordable loss. And then this is one of the most important, in fact last 5 years a lot of my research has been inside this principle, which is the crazy quilt. And what the crazy quilt is, you are going to talk to anybody and everybody that you can meet and get a chance to talk to. And in talking to them, what you are trying to do is you are not just trying to get advice and input and information. You are always trying to talk to them in such a way that you are getting them to commit something real to the venture, even though you are only asking them to commit something within their affordable loss. But the thing is, they have to commit something real, because as the entrepreneur said, the only information that is actually useful is the one that actually comes with skin in the game. So what they mean by that is, if somebody underwrites the next step in some way, then that step is, you do not need to predict the future, you do not, because it becomes affordable loss for you. Right? So the idea is you move commitment by commitment. So that is what the crazy quilt is, and you do not know who is going to commit what to your venture for what reason. Right? So that is where it's a crazy quilt, the pattern is not given. So you do not have to go and convince people, oh, here is why you should buy this is a great, you say, I am thinking of doing this, what do you think? And then he has his own ideas, and then he talks to somebody, and then slowly we actually think, okay, if the three of us got together, we could do something with this idea, which may not be my idea that I originally started with, right? So we are going to look into that in some depth. So that is the crazy quilt. But as people start coming on board and you start building something, slowly the things are becoming more predictable too, right? Because you are making commitments on which you are delivering, but still there are things outside your control. So something can come and hit you from outside, and that is the lemonade principle, that when life throws lemons at you, make lemonade. So you have to be good at reacting even to negative things by making them into positive, and then over a period of time you start understanding that you can actually shape the future, that the future is not something that is in any trends or thing that you can reshape the world in such a way that you can succeed in it. So you are not asking yourself, here is the world and how do I succeed within that world. You can ask that, but effectuators are not asking that. They are saying, how do I build a world in which I can succeed, in which my crazy quilt of stakeholders can together succeed. And so those are the 5 principles of effectuation. Now we can take a break, and when you come back, I will just give you a couple of stories. I have got hundreds. I will give you a couple of stories just to root ourselves, and then we will start thinking about teaching. Good? So I am going to keep it very light, and in thinking through the teaching, we will come back over and over into depth in the different, because as my mother said, only when you try to teach it, you will actually understand. So my standing here and giving you another lecture for 90 minutes on each principle is not necessary. Okay?